God on the Move.
We want to help churches understand what's happening in culture, but also culture to understand why churches or why Christians are doing what they do. The second thing is that we want to give a voice to Christians in Europe who have something to say from a biblical perspective and who are often not heard. And the third thing we were saying that we wanted to do is to do journalism that serves God's mission.
The Lausanne Cape Town Commitment from 2010, which so many evangelicals from around the world stand by, states that, and I quote, "We commit ourselves to a renewed critical and creative engagement with media and technology as part of making the case for the truth of Christ in our media cultures. We must do so as God's ambassadors of truth, grace, love, peace, and justice." Evangelical Focus is a news website with a Christian perspective on current issues in Europe to build bridges between evangelical churches and all of society. You are listening to God on the Move, a Lausanne movement production, and this is the story of 9 years of Evangelical Focus. The voice you heard earlier is Joel Forster. He's co-founder and director of Evangelical Focus. And this is his story.
I am Joel Forster. I live in Spain since I was a child, and I'm a journalist. That has been my passion since I was a teenager. I always listened to the radio broadcast of the football, of the Spanish Football League, and then so I was really thinking I want to be a journalist like those on the radio. Later, I discovered that perhaps sports was not my thing, but I wanted to try to connect my faith as a Christian with what happens in culture and society. So I had the chance to go to university in Barcelona, which is one of the bigger cities in Spain. And after that, I had the chance also to be involved with Christians in university, other students in the Bible groups. We call them GBU, which is an IFES movement, the IFES movement in Spain. And there I discovered much about how the Bible impacts not only our personal lives in the church, but also the culture and how to do not only evangelism, but also having discussions about important topics in society from a gospel perspective. So that's my passion. And I'm married. I have two little girls, aged 4 and 2, Vera and Elsa, and we are members of a small church near the port here in Valencia and trying to have an impact in our neighborhood.
I wish that I could tell you when Joel and I spoke, I didn't make an error right at the start. Obviously, I could edit this out or not tell you about it, but I want to mention it because it shows something important about habits. Even though I have a clear theological opinion about using the word Christian as an adjective, like in Christian artist, just because it's so ingrained in our use of language, I asked Joel about his journey as a Christian journalist. He kinda didn't make a big topic out of it, but we did get to speak about it more later. For now, here's his response to my question.
I'm not sure if I would use the label Christian journalism because I think people are Christians, but projects are made by Christians, but shouldn't be only focused to Christians. Well, our website is called Evangelical Focus, so in a sense that would contradict what I'm saying. But what I mean is that we want to do journalism that is following journalistic standards, that is understandable for non-Christians, and that focuses not only on what happens inside of the church, but what happens in our context where we live, which is Europe as a continent. For me, it was in a conference I attended in Brussels when I was finishing university. And it was a conference focused on society and politics. And we could go to visit the parliament. We met the former president of the parliament, a Polish politician who is a Christian. And he shared his vision of how he wanted to have an impact in Europe from his own faith. And I remember being with other students of law and media and economy, etc. And we were just hearing about different professionals who were coming in. People were experienced and sharing what were they doing in their profession from their Christian perspective. And that was a penny dropping moment. I remember being there in Parliament, listening to these Christians saying, wow, that's what I would love to do. I would love to connect 100% my faith with my studies and my work. And I started to understand this idea of that there is no divide between the secular and the sacred. And there are authors like John Stott and others who have started all this thinking. And for me, it was a discovery. And I was really enjoying the fact that I could be a full-time journalist, hopefully in the future, I was thinking. And at the same time, I have to be a full-time Christian. And how to connect those two, that was what I was learning from others and being inspired. So that's how, after a time of serving as a staff worker for the Bible groups at university and trying to disciple and encourage students to think in this way, I also then, after some years, accepted to be starting this project for Europe. And this comes from another project in Spain, which is called Protestante Digital, which is the first news website created by evangelicals in Spain 20 years ago now. And this was a medical doctor who was working in a hospital, but he was very much involved in his church as well. And then he has this passion of trying to show to society in Spain, where we are a small minority of 1.5%. It is growing, but slowly. And often in the media, when you hear news about evangelicals, it's very much linked to USA, of course, but also to Latin America. Or there has always been this idea in our Roman Catholic country that Protestants are a cult and you have to be careful with them, not getting too much involved, etc. So in all this context that we have had in Spain in the past, this medical doctor Pedro, he wanted to launch something that would be a platform, an open platform for all kind of evangelical Christians, from Brethren to Baptists, Pentecostals, Charismatics, whoever is in the line of understanding that the Bible is our authority and that Jesus Christ is our Savior and that we have a mission. So it started to bring people together. And after starting with an update of the website and these newsletters, very old fashioned, and once a week, then it was 3 times a week. And then some other people and myself were encouraged to join to write more on a daily basis. And this really exploded in a sense of having much more audience than the reality of evangelicals were in Spain, in the sense that many people from Latin America were coming in because of the language, because of Spanish. So we would have people from Colombia, Mexico, Argentina, Chile, from the United States. And so that was growing and was very plural in the contents. You would have pastors, you would have people who are just professionals in their area who would speak about their Christian perspectives on the laws of Spain, for instance, and all this under the umbrella of the Spanish Evangelical Alliance, who has this thinking of how can we bring together the church to have an impact in society. That was 20 years ago. And after the years, people in Europe were starting to ask, why couldn't we bring this model to other places? And of course, in Europe, there are countries with a strong evangelical presence, like the UK, like Germany, like Netherlands, like the Scandinavian countries, who already have their magazines and their websites. But there was also the need for more thinking of Southern Europe, or Central and Eastern Europe, to start connections. And it has been really great to be starting connections with pastors and ministries and evangelical alliances, the Lausanne movement people, and see what could be done on a European level. So that's how in 2015 we launched what was the first news website on a daily basis, daily news and opinion from a biblical or evangelical perspective, and that was Evangelical Focus.
I'm always amazed by how good God is at planning things and how many people and situations He would use to get a message or vision across to one person. After the story of this long lead up to finally starting Evangelical Focus, I was curious to know whether Joel still remembers the first article.
The first was the editorial article, so it was a presentation of our vision. And I remember the months ahead of that, of all the technical issues were very slow and many hours till late in the night with our tech person trying to change little things so that it will be publishable. And finally, on the 8th of January 2015, we could launch our first home site with several articles, and one of them was Welcome to Evangelical Focus, I think it was the title. And we had some of opinions of different people from Spain, but also some people we had contacted in Europe about why this was needed and why we wanted to share this vision, which has 3 points. We want to build bridges between churches and society. In both directions, we want to help churches understand what's happening in culture, but also culture to understand why churches or why Christians are doing what they do. The second thing is that we want to give a voice to Christians in Europe who have something to say from a biblical perspective and who are often not heard. And the third thing we were saying that we wanted to do is to do journalism that serves God's mission. So we want to do good journalism, but we understand this is a ministry that is part of what God is already doing in our continent. So that was what we were trying to explain. And yeah, after that, it was just learning from scratch because none of us is native English speaker. And of course, there were things in Europe we didn't understand, and we still are learning the differences between what it means to be a Protestant or evangelical or evangelical in Germany or in the UK. How is the context there with evangelicals compared to, I don't know, a place like Portugal or Greece, which is completely different. All the history of the churches in the different places, what are national churches, what are independent churches. Of course, in Spain, we only have three evangelical churches, no national church, and this is very different from Scandinavia, for instance, or for countries in Eastern Europe where there is all the Orthodox Christian presence, no? So it was doing mistakes and being corrected by people and asking much. And it has been really encouraging to have so many people who have been using our platform to give their own perspectives from the ground in different places. So far, we've had 390 authors that have written on evangelical focus. Many of them perhaps just one, two, or three articles, but many others as well every week or at least every month are contributing from different places. And to be honest, it's done with a very low budget. That means we are most of the time not paying people for writing, but it's more people who say, hey, I have this story in my country. I want to share it with you. And that's just great because it's an identification with this vision of gospel in our secularized context of Europe. And we really think, apart from the people in Europe who would read evangelical focus, there are many people from other places of the rest of the world. And we think that this can be a chance to show how to be a Christian as a minority in a secularized continent and try to, as we learn, also inspire others in how to live in this post Christian Europe or pre-revival, as others say. But that's what we try to do. Bring as many people together, offer our platform, look for people who have good things to say, but perhaps have not been listened outside of their country, and try to bring them to a larger platform.
Now, coming back to my era at the beginning of the conversation and the threefold vision of evangelical focus. As a reminder, the first point is to build bridges between churches and society. The second is to give a voice to Christians who have something important to contribute from a biblical perspective. And thirdly, to do good journalism. Yes, you heard correctly. Not Christian journalism, but good journalism. I think Joel explains it perfectly.
I think as Christians, we have to be holistic in our approach to everything. And that this is not only in the workplace, but also in our lifestyle. For me, it's often a challenge because I was just yesterday talking to a parent of a child in the school of my children. And she asked me, what's your job? And I said, well, I'm a journalist. And she said, oh, that's really cool. And I was saying, yeah, I'm also a Christian, I said a Protestant Christian. And so what I do is an independent project in English for Europe. And we give our Christian view on things happening in society. And of course, I don't know how she would understand or not what I was saying, because I realized that for many people who are not believers, they would see religion as something very private, which you practice in some parts of your life, some days of the week, but it shouldn't affect much more than that, no? I think as Christians, we're called to be as excellent as we can in our workplace. Much of the time, it will mean that we are perhaps not so able to share about our Christian faith, but still we have chances to have conversations with people outside of the working hours, perhaps, or even if you have a pause for lunch or whatever. That's the experience of my wife. She's a teacher in a public school, and she has these small conversations where she can give glimpses of their faith and hope, or ask questions and hope that this will get into a larger conversation. But in my case, I have this chance, and God has given me the opportunity of doing something that is specifically related with mission. But at the same time, it's not straightforward evangelism. So I think there's a tension there between what are the standards I should have as a journalist and pursuing the truth and veracity and checking my sources that what I publish is right and is understandable for someone who is not a Christian, not using a religious jargon. But at the same time, I see that as a calling to join God's mission. And sometimes we think, oh, if this project is good enough, bearing in mind that if it's a Christian project, then if it's done in a basic way, it's good enough, no? And I think we are in a cultural context where people are surrounded by very good products and also entertainment or artistic products, and we often have low resources and small teams as Christians, no? But still, I think we have this opportunity of doing our best, getting trained in our profession, no, learning, and then try our best to be part of the conversation in society, and with this mindset of God's mission, what He wants to do, what doors He wants to open, what chances are there to have relationships with others. And it's not easy. Much of the time, we can get a bit disappointed or depressed at seeing, well, our resources are small. But then again, we look at how Jesus spoke about the kingdom, and he spoke about small things that were used by God, who is rich in everything and has all the resources, and then uses those to make something grow in places where the gospel was not present. I think the space of media has become more and more important in the last years, mainly also after the pandemic when everyone went online. No? And Lars Dahl from the Lausanne movement, he's a journalism professor. He says that every ministry is a media ministry. Everything that we do now has its impact on the internet and can reach anybody anywhere. So I think it's really interesting to see also the churches going more and more on this virtual world and using media very well. And that's very encouraging. And then also influencers in the good sense of the word, Christians who really have understood what their calling is to mission, have their podcasts like yours or have their YouTube channels. And in Spain, we have a young evangelist, and he does 1 hour interviews with artists, even people in politics or people who are YouTubers, gamers. And he just would sit them down and have them try different coffees he buys in different places and are quality coffee. And what do you think about this coffee? And well, this coffee is from Africa or from Latin America, and it's great quality. And then he would go on with conversation about who are you, what is your life story, and then what do you think about God? Why do you think nowadays there is all these different identities and all these different thinkings, and why cannot we agree on the basic things? No, and try to have a conversation in a very Gen Z style, which is very much about how you feel about things, how do you see your life, what is important to you, and how could we have a better society. That kind of conversations, and that which leads to introduce some words of Jesus and ask people what they think about Jesus. So I think there are many chances that we have in the context of media, which could be straightforward evangelism, but also could be this kind of conversations which open more questions than giving answers, hoping that this will lead then to a deeper connection and thinking. There's much to do, and I really encourage young people who have a desire to communicate the gospel and have an interest in what happens in culture to get trained and teach us, those who are older now, how to do things to connect with the Generation Z, which, by the way, according to statistics in several countries, are showing more interest in spirituality, much more than their parents. So this is again a big chance that we have. It's amazing. We just published an article about Finland from a journalist there, and he was reporting about the increase in young men who have an interest in attending church, in praying, and who say they believe in God. Perhaps in a very general sense, perhaps they might not have discovered Jesus as a source of life, but have an interest in rediscovering Christianity in a context where secularism has occupied all the areas of society. You know?
This, of course, reminded me of the conversation I had with Thomas Frovin in episode 9 about the spiritual awakening in the Code of Denmark. Also, you can find the article about Finland in the description of this episode. It's an astonishing story and one we hope to hear more about in the future. However, we want to celebrate the 9 years of Evangelical Focus. We've already heard quite a bit about the beginnings, but 9 years is a long time, and I wanted to know about the journey itself. Has it always been easy and straightforward, or were there unexpected barriers and challenges along the way?
It's always upwards. No, to be honest, sometimes you get excited about a vision. In our case, it was Jaume. Jaume is a Spanish church planter, and he is one of the most inspiring people in thinking about mission. And he told me, let's go have a coffee, and I want to share a project with you, an idea that we have. And he said, why don't we start something that is journalism from a Christian perspective for Europe online, and why don't you start it? And first it was like, no. And then it was like, wow, that sounds really good to that Christians could open their mobile phones in the morning and have a newsletter with news from Europe from a Christian perspective every day. And so I was really excited about it after some time, and then we started it. But then when the years go by, first I would say 3-4 years, of course you realize that this is a massive idea. It's much more than we could really achieve. And then sometimes you write emails to people in Europe, pastors or people who are referenced, and you get no answer back. And you try to open some doors or explain the project to someone in a conference somewhere else in Europe, and they would look at you like saying, I don't know if that's what we need. Or some others would say, but you are not evangelizing. You should be clearly telling the gospel. Why would you do just this journalism thing? And then sometimes we have, of course, also looked for funds, and we have knocked on the door of Christian foundations and they have money available. But then after the process finishes with your application, explaining, interview, etc., they would say, well, the project is really nice, but it doesn't fit in our mission understanding. So yeah, sometimes you would also not find many stories. You would say nothing is happening in the last couple of days and I don't know what to publish. But at the same time, there have been so many encouraging moments where God has really confirmed our calling to this. Of my colleague Belen, she's a journalist in Madrid, and myself, we're the two who are full time, and then all the rest is collaborating with others. And what encourages me most is to find other people with the same vision in Europe who are saying, yes, we need to do this. We need to understand discipleship also from the perspective of discipling the church in understanding our times, as we read in the Old Testament. Those people who understood the times and had a vision from God for the moment they were living in. And it's also inspiring to see Christians. Of course, there's the case of this well-known politician in Finland, Päivi Räsänen. We were, I think, one of the first media, if not the first, to inform about it in English because there were journalists in Finland sharing about this case of a politician who had a biblical stand on sexuality and then has been prosecuted and is still in this legal case. But there were others, like in Bulgaria, we were contacted by a pastor in Sofia who was saying, we're really struggling because the government wants to change the religion law, which means that minorities like our faith minority as evangelicals would be not allowed to have funding from outside, from missionaries from outside, or people who are foreigners could teach in theological seminaries, etc. And how they were doing every Sunday after the worship services of the churches, they would go together to one of the main squares in Sofia and have their demonstration asking for religious freedom, even in the snow or even on storms, for 4 months, until finally they had the chance to really speak face to face to the ministers of the government and explain, hey, we are Bulgarians, we want the good of society, we are a faith minority, and the human rights need to be respected. And that draft law then was cancelled and was a big victory for them. So that kind of stories also in Spain or in Italy or in Greece or France, where the growth of churches is very big, and there are many, many interesting stories. So try to connect all those dots and give a voice to people who have something to say and are doing something good for their cities. That's just really encouraging. It's much more encouraging than the small things that sometimes you get a bit, depending on the day, a bit disappointed.
About the member of the Scottish Parliament, Kate Elizabeth Forbes, a committed Christian who considered standing for the election as First Minister of Scotland, Joel added,
she's another very good inspiration because despite you might think that she was defeated in a sense, she showed how to do things, no? She was kind, she was very good at her job. She was very well perceived by the people in the polls and the surveys. And then she had to decide what was more important for her faith or her career. And for now, she paused her career, but I'm sure she will come back later and have an impact. So yeah, those examples are great.
Before we continue with the story, I want to let you know that we want to share mission stories from the Global Church with the Global Church. So if you have a story to share or know someone who might have, please contact us at podcast@lausanne.org. That is podcast@lausanne.org.
Right now, Evangelical Focus is being read by people in almost every country in the world. Some of the countries are very small figures, but people in the United States or the Philippines, South Africa, Nigeria, India, they read Evangelical Focus in their thousands or tens of thousands, some of them throughout the year. In total, we had 400,000 users last year in 2023. And in Europe, the countries who visited us most are the UK, and then Sweden, Germany, Netherlands, and then southern countries like Portugal, Spain, France, Italy. There are people from places following us. I think because of the English language that we use, which is a basic English, as you can understand, because many of us are not native English speakers, and that's the reality of Europe, which is nice, this plurality of cultures and of languages. But because of the English language, there might be many people in Europe who would not read our website, meaning in a sense that perhaps it is more Christian leaders who have some international experience or who have traveled who would be more the people who follow our contents. And so in a sense, with this readership who is perhaps more informed or more interested in cultural topics, that means that we are reaching people who are also influential in their own circles. So our audience is, of course, much smaller than secular media outlets and even smaller than some other Christian projects. But we are really trying to inform or shape the views from a Christian perspective on people who could then share it with others. So one of the nice things of the impact is that we have several partners, several national media projects who translate our contents in their own languages and then would share it in the churches or magazines or whatever they use in their context. And we do the same. We use some of the reports or even video reports sometimes or interesting articles and translate them into English, spreading the word with others elsewhere. And it's always, because it's an online project, you have the numbers, but you don't have many times the conversations. It's always great when we get feedback from people. Also, when we can travel and visit a conference, for instance, like the European Leadership Forum, which is one of the conferences where we go every year and we have these conversations with others and learn about the stories of others and try then to be spokespeople for them, but also have feedback of how they use their contents in their own context. I would say highlight of doing journalism from a Christian perspective is when you can meet young people in person and have discussions about themes or topics that are important to them and that are part of the debate in society. Having workshops with people and addressing how do we consume news, how do we consume social media, who influences us, what are the messages out there, and then asking questions about how does this have to do or not with your faith and what would Jesus say about all these things that are being talked. That's one of the most inspiring things. We had a recent law in Spain on transgenderism and how teenagers can transit to a new gender. And then it was great to have a conversation with high school and university students and say, yeah, so what do you think about all this? And what do you think about what your friends say? And how do you see it as a Christian? And how would you have a sensitive or respectful conversation about this with others in your classroom that are transitioning? And what do you think that politicians are doing with this? So all this conversation with people in the churches who are very much interested in those topics. I always, when this conversation comes up of how to relate with certain issues of our time, people are really, really interested. They are hungry to know how can we connect our faith with what's happening around us. And that's really encouraging. I think that's the most encouraging thing of my work. And the lows, I think it has to do with seeing the distance between the dream and the reality of what your capabilities or resources or the team is. And that sometimes leads to some frustration of saying we would love to do this. And I think God wants us to go in that direction, but how do we do it? But that's the gospel, no? That's how the kingdom works. It's God who does things. He invites us to be part of it. He works on our patience and our ego. He helps us to bring us a bit down to who we really are and who He really is. And I think that's a process of learning as well for all of us Christians in seeing how big God's mission is, how the resources are small, the workers are few, the fields are ready, and God is who decides who and when and how and with which resources He will do His mission.
As always, there is so much more to say. So many stories of success, breakthrough, but also challenge and disappointment. If this story inspired you, or you're interested in learning about topics discussed in society from a Christian perspective, consider subscribing to Evangelical Focus. You can do so through the link in the description below, or just head over to www.evangelicalfocus.com. All that is left now is to hear one more time from Joel, as he shares some encouragements, prayer requests, and a message to the global church.
Yeah, I want to really encourage those people who are passionate about culture and society in their country to get connected to others who have this passion, to network with others, and to really read their Bible seriously to try to find all the treasures that God has put in there about how to connect our faith with what happens around us. We are very happy to have conversations and to speak to others in Europe, but perhaps even elsewhere, about how to start a project, a journalistic project from a Christian perspective on current issues. We want to share our vision. We want to see others doing it as well, and hopefully doing it then together and partner in this. We might not be many journalists who have this vision, but I know of others who really have a passion for this and do a great job in different countries. So we should come together and collaborate. Please pray for opportunities, open doors, and not only among Christians, but also with non-Christians in Europe. And pray for wisdom when in our team we come together and discuss the topics we want to address. We always end up praying for God's wisdom to know what topics to choose, what topics are more relevant or less relevant, and how to approach them in a way that is gentle, that is sensitive, but at the same time clear, and trying to give a voice that is different, that reflects the values of the kingdom with courage. I just want to say that as Christians, we have a chance to live in a way that makes a difference. And of course, that starts in our personal relationships with our neighbors, with the parents of our children, with our people in our workplace. But we also have the chance of showing that living God's way and following Jesus is a better story. As Glyn Harrison, the author, says, we have a better story to share with others. And we are not sharing it from a position of saying that we are superior, but from a position of hopefully of humility, but understanding that what God offers, not only the values of the Christian faith, but also the experience of following this beautiful and powerful and loving God is just much better than anything else that is offered in our society. And in a Western context and secularized context like Europe, I think there are many people who are looking for answers to questions that get bigger and bigger, because really we are going in a direction as a culture who might seem very modern or very progressive, even in a good sense of the word progressive, with our technology and our ability to consume and have well-being, etc. But people are realizing that they need more, and the gospel offers more, and Jesus is available. And we have the chance of communicating both on a personal level but also on a social level through the media.
You've listened to God on the Move, a Lausanne Movement podcast, where we want to listen to mission stories from the global church. Through listening to what God is doing around the world, we hope to encourage and challenge the global church to faithful obedience to the Great Commission. So let's accelerate global mission together toward a vision for the gospel for every person, disciple-making churches for every people and place, Christ-like leaders in every church and sector, and kingdom impact in every sphere of society. If you enjoyed listening to this episode, be sure to subscribe and follow us for more.